For sex trafficking, the statistics are showing that the average age of entry is between 12 to 14. And now we're starting to hear it's even younger. So that number has gone down to 10 to 13. And again, that's an average. So if you think about that, that means they're younger and they're older. But, we're seeing girls much further down the road at our organization, but at some point, they were 10, 11 years old when they were introduced into that lifestyle. And so we don't see as many girls being rescued at that age, mostly because, they go undetected for so long. And by the time they're young adults, we're seeing them receiving services, and people assume, well, these are adults making those choices, not realizing that it has been a long road for them in that life.
But thank you so much for coming to talk about this. I mean, you're obviously perfect to talk about this issue. I mean, it's one of those that you almost don't really want to talk about, and you don't want to hear about it. Mm-hmm. You don't want to know it's true and that it's out there, but it is. And because of that, it's super important to have it out there. So why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about your background, how you became involved with the sex trafficking issue, and obviously how that led to where you are today.
Yeah, so my background's in social work, and I knew I wanted to help vulnerable populations, but I didn't really quite know what my population was going to be. And so I speak Russian fluently, and naturally I thought I'll just go to Russia and work with orphans there. It just makes sense. Yeah. I know the language and have a heart for young people. And the doors never opened, and it never really worked out. And so instead I decided to pursue my master's degree in business. And during that time is when I found out about trafficking, and was living in San Diego. And I thought, oh my goodness, if San Diego is, one of the hot cities, what is being done? And so that kind of took me down this rabbit hole of what is going on legislative-wise, what are we doing in our community? What are the programs that are available? And so I just immersed myself in the issue and just tried to educate myself as much as I could, and using the already existing resources and the shelters and programs that were out there. And in that process is where I found out just the biggest gap that we were seeing with girls that were being rescued. And so there are shelters and there are programs to help them become stable and to really help them thrive in that stage of life. But people weren't really thinking long term. Mm-hmm. What happens after they're done in this residential program? How do we safely reintegrate them back into the community and help them to be thriving individuals? So I realized, okay, if that's the gap, if no one else is doing something, then we should do something. Yeah.
How did you first find out about it in San Diego?
Originally, I found out about it from the church I was going to. Mm. They had a program there that they were trying to get people around to do something, and they didn't know what that was going to be. They found out about the issue, and they started educating us. And in that process, thought, okay, I want to do something on my own as well.
Yeah, it's really, I couldn't tell you the first time I found out about it, but it's I remember it was what? This is real? This is crazy.
Yeah, I think most people's exposure to the issue is through film. And so the assumption is that sex trafficking is international. We watch Taken, right, and we think, my goodness, I'm never going to let my future daughter, travel abroad. That's it. This is unsafe. And that is where sex trafficking is happening. Or we hear about, little girls being sold to different Asian countries, but we don't think about, well, what could that look like here? And so it's easy to think, it's the subject removed far from my own community. And so I won't think about it.
It's a different culture. It's different. Yeah. Well, let's, jump into what sex trafficking is in and of itself. Obviously sex trafficking is kind of a category within human trafficking. Mm-hmm. To be honest, yes. I didn't totally know the difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could let us know what it is exactly, that'd be great.
So the federal definition is anyone who is being sexually exploited, commercially sexually exploited through force, fraud, or coercion is considered a sex trafficking victim. Or if they are minor. So as long as you're under 18, the assumption is you are not making that decision on your own. And so automatically you're considered a victim of sex trafficking.
What are the most common like age ranges? Like how many are minors or not minors?
The statistics are all over the place. And so you can look at so many organizations that will post various statistics, and it's really hard to actually not, get hard numbers on this issue because so many girls are just not being reported. And it's an issue that is just so broad and it hits so many different areas that we honestly don't really know the full scope. The current, federal statistic is that there's approximately 100 to 300,000 children sold across the U.S. every year.
Just the U.S.?
Yes. But as you can see, 100,000 to 300,000, that's a big range because we really don't know. And that number could even be much higher because those are the numbers that we're seeing that are going to get services or actually calling the hotlines.
But do you have a number for maybe worldwide? If that's just the U.S.
Yes. So for worldwide, they're saying it's about 45 million people who are in some kind of slavery. So that is a general number, again, for human trafficking, which includes sex trafficking. But again, there isn't anything that we're locking down. Yeah.
What are the other, categories, of trafficking? If not just sex trafficking, what else? Like labor, forced labor?
Yes. So there's labor trafficking, indentured servitude, and so anyone that is held against their will or having to give over majority of their income or altogether their income, or were brought to a certain city or country based on a potential job, and then finding out when they arrive that is not the case and their documents are taken away. And so, or some that will pay a fee to actually leave the country if they know that there isn't just a future for them there. And then when they arrive to their destination, now they owe that person so much more because somehow these fees start to multiply, and there's so many other hidden fees that they didn't know about. And now they're trapped because they have to pay off that debt, which they will never pay off.
And this is what people will call like modern form of slavery, essentially.
Yes.
45 million people worldwide estimated. Mm-hmm. Wow. And what number is that for sex trafficking worldwide, do you think? Total estimate. I know the numbers are rough.
Yeah, that's a hard number. I haven't seen any solid numbers on that, so I don't want to quote.
Yeah. Do you know the age range? Like, do they have a certain number that are more ages more vulnerable than others?
For sex trafficking, the statistics are showing that the average age of entry is between 12 to 14. And now we're starting to hear it's even younger. So that number has gone down to 10 to 13. And again, that's an average. So if you think about that, that means they're younger and they're older. But, we're seeing girls much further down the road at our organization, but at some point, they were 10, 11 years old when they were introduced into that lifestyle. And so we don't see as many girls being rescued at that age, mostly because, they go undetected for so long. And by the time they're young adults, we're seeing them receiving services, and people assume, well, these are adults making those choices, not realizing that it has been a long road for them in that life.
And is it just girls?
No, statistics are saying it's about 70% females.
And 30% boys.
So there are 30% boys out there that, too, we're not seeing very many young men reaching out for services. I don't know if it's just the social stigma that they are up against, or just the lack of services that are currently available for young men. But we don't see very many, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but we know they're out there.
I knew there. I was like, there has to be some percentage that are boys. Mm-hmm. I had no idea it was around 30%.
Yeah,
that's very high. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but I know it's like, it's essentially a business.
It is. Someone is benefiting.
Right. Otherwise it wouldn't be such a thing. And so, I mean, who are the buyers here? Who are the buyers and the sellers here?
It could be anyone. So it's hard to describe a specific individual for either category, because a trafficker can be either a man, a young woman, an older woman. It could be anyone just unassumingly trafficking a individual. We would never even consider them to be a trafficker. We recently saw in the papers that there was a mother trafficking her teenage daughter. And so from the outside looking in, no one would ever assume that would be the case. So for traffickers, the ages span from high school age all the way through 70s, 80s. There's really no age cap. And then, when it comes to those that are purchasing sex, it's really a wide range, again, from anywhere from prominent businessmen to even those that are politicians and those that are in higher positions that respected positions. And then there are those average men who from middle class income. And so there really is no pinpoint of who is buying these young girls on the streets.
Wow. And are there groups of girls or boys that are more susceptible to falling into this? I guess, how does someone fall into this world?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are a lot of variables and a lot of just vulnerabilities that play into someone becoming a victim of trafficking. And so, some might be just susceptible to it because they don't have a stable home. Maybe their father figure is missing. Maybe it's a violent environment in their home. Some are coming from lower socioeconomic communities, but not all. We're seeing girls from various communities, and it's usually girls who just have that either low self-esteem or just low self-worth, and so they're looking for someone to validate them. They're looking for someone to come along and say that you're worth it, and I believe in you. Maybe no one else does, but I believe you have dreams, and I want to help you realize those dreams. And so as young girls, we want to believe that, and especially if you don't hear that often, and so they become much more vulnerable to becoming victims.
So is that a popular way that these traffickers get girls, is by kind of wooing them at first?
Yes, so there's several different types of pimps. We call those the Romeo pimps, traffickers, and then there are the guerrilla pimps, and they are the ones that will just kidnap and exploit. And so
actually abduct more
exactly,
forceful.
Exactly. And so they're nicknamed the guerrilla pimps because they're much more violent, and they will have just more harsher punishments for the young girls. And so a lot of people just think when they see young girls on the street that I don't see chains, I don't see anything holding them back, I don't see someone standing right next to them watching their every step. And so the assumption is, well, she can leave at any point, so why doesn't she leave? And so people don't realize just the manipulation that goes into this process of breaking down this girl for her to trust this guy. And so some go through that process of wooing this girl and getting her trust that way, and really flipping the switch and saying, well, now you have to do this. And maybe he knows where her family is. Maybe he knows she has a younger sister, and if you don't do it, I'll get your sister. Or I'll tell your family. And some girls are just so embarrassed and ashamed that they don't want that to happen, so they'll just keep going along. But those, young girls are also being brutalized, because if they don't meet a certain quota, a nightly quota, then there's a punishment. And so that could be either you don't sleep, you can't sit, you can't lay down for that night, you have to stay standing, or you get physically beaten. And the brutality ranges with every pimp, but there really are, are no great days for these young girls. Or, I think we've been conditioned to believe the whole pretty woman facade that these young girls are out in the street, they're hustling, they're being empowered, and they meet these wealthy men who buy them these nice things and they fall in love with them. That doesn't happen in reality. The reality is these girls never know if some guy that's picking them up that night, some John, can either beat them or do whatever they want. And so their life is at stake every single time. And we don't think about that. We see these girls on the streets and our first assumption is, oh, they want to be there.
Well, you bring up a good point about how I think some people would make the argument that prostitution can't, or like we'll say even like high-end, like escorts, where, at least, people think they're making lots of money or living a glamorous life or whatever, and that they choose to do this, that's a form of empowerment, or it can be. But you're saying that's not necessarily the case. Like, this isn't necessarily women making the choice, I want to make a lot of money, I want to live the high life, so I'm going to do this by my own will.
There's a very small percentage that I would say are out there without a pimp or without someone controlling them. But they're not, I would still say that they're victims. I wouldn't say that they, are victims of sex trafficking. They're victims in some form of way, because no girl wakes up in the morning, little girl, and says, one day when I grow up, I want to be a prostitute.
Right, because that's
just like, not the reality.
Because then the next question would be like, well, would you be okay with your, daughter, sister, mother, whatever, going off and being, obviously not a victim of sex trafficking, but like being a prostitute.
Yeah, no girl finds themselves, dreaming of that and then, becoming that. It's usually they're victims of circumstance in some form of another. And so, it looks different for every individual, but I would say that it's far less empowering than we assume it is.
What are your thoughts on making prostitution legal? Some people say that could help with sex trafficking because it would take away some of the demand, maybe, or you could put regulations or whatever. And then I've heard that that's not the case at all. What do you think?
The countries that tried to do that are seeing backlash. And so it really is not a model that works. And so I think by legalizing, then we're telling these young girls, you are not victims. Girls that are still being forced to be on the street, that they are now choosing this as a profession. We're taking away that victim title from them. And I feel like that in itself, we're missing out on an opportunity to help girls that really need that help.
Do you think there's a connection at all to porn and the sex trafficking industry?
I'm glad you asked. Yes, I honestly, personally believe there's a strong tie between the adult entertainment industry and the sex trafficking industry. And there really is almost like a blurred line, because it all starts with how we are portraying women in our media and what we're saying their value is, how we're teaching our young people, boys and girls, to value women's bodies and to value them as individuals. And as we start to objectify them in media, we're saying they're not as valuable. Their worth is less than another man. And so as that becomes a part of normal thinking, then it's much easier for us to then turn a blind eye when we see someone on the street. And it's hard for us to really see that we created that path for that individual because we said, that was sexy. That is something you should aspire to. And so less is more. And we're now creating this, lust and desire for men to go out and seek. And what we're seeing is that men who are involved in pornography, the longer length of time that they're involved, the more violent they're becoming when it comes to seeking out sex from women who are on the streets.
Really?
And so it's this insatiable desire. And it's one of those things that becomes so numb. And they then start to see these girls as objects, and instead of as women who potentially could be at risk or in danger every time.
And how do these guys, I guess, where do they find pimps? Like, where do these things happen and go down? I mean, is it online? Is it, if it's not online, where is it?
Combination. So we'll see girls on the streets. There are several prominent boulevards in Los Angeles that are known for hotbeds for girls that are being trafficked. And then you'll find them online. So recently we saw that Craigslist, or Backpage, was shut down because they had ads selling underage girls. And so we're seeing just a rise in the internet as well, as far as girls being sold, because it's something that is hard to control. And, a girl can say she's a certain age when she really is not. That age is much younger. And, it's hard for people to actually catch and see. So it's a combination. It could be in brothels, it can be online, it can be in homes in different communities where these girls are held and sold. And then it could be on the streets where, what we assume as the regular prostitution type of behavior. A lot of these girls are not there by choice.
I've heard that some big, huge national events are kind of hotbeds for these. Like, I've heard the Super Bowl is a really bad one. That could be, maybe that's not true, but.
Yes, I feel like it's any kind of event that brings a lot of people together where, first of all, there are buyers. So there are people who are looking for some kind of additional entertainment, and also events that are so incredibly busy that it's easy to get lost in the shuffle, right? So it's hard to really point someone out when there's a crowd of people engaging in some kind of, they're watching a sport or any type of entertainment. And so it's not necessarily just, the Super Bowl, it's any event that creates that type of, busy environment.
What do you think people could do, like, say, in that instance where it is an in-person event or it's something like happening before our eyes? What can either the event workers or even us as spectators, like, kind of keep our eye out for? Or
yeah, it's typically what you're going to be looking for is someone who looks either scared or looks like they just don't want to be there. Obviously, they're going to be wearing a lot less clothing than you as well, and so
you think they're actually like trying to promote at these events too?
Yeah, you'll see girls throughout, and it's if you look at a NASCAR event, probably a little more difficult to kind of figure out who's who there. But I feel like it's a little bit more recognizable because there is going to be someone there, unfortunately, that is, in a sense, making sure that she doesn't run away.
Like a handler, like they're,
in a sense, yes. Yeah. And so, it's not safe for anyone to feel like they're going to be the rescuer and they're going to go help this girl and, bring her to the authorities or to whatever they think that in the moment that could look like. The safest thing is to always call the hotline. There is a national hotline that receives phone calls, and they receive calls from those that are being trafficked and from those that think that they're experiencing a trafficking situation in their presence.
This kind of makes me think, so obviously right now at this time that we're having that a big controversy of the families being separated at the Mexican border. I've heard from some people that one of the justifications for that's being put out there is to check for any any trafficking being happening. Do you think there's something to that?
I think it's so muddy.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I feel like it could be both. so to check if they're being trafficked to the States. But then what's happening is those that aren't being reunified, or sometimes are being reunified with what could be considered a family member, but really is not a family member. And then they're being trafficked anyways. So there really isn't,
So they'll still
perfect
reunite
solution
them
for
if
that.
if they find out that they're not.
Sometimes they can pose as an uncle,
Oh.
your great uncle, and you're told to keep your mouth shut. And so you won't say anything, or maybe a great uncle you've never met. And as a small child, they assume adults are telling the truth, and so you believe that. And sometimes it can be reunified with those that do not have their best interest at mind.
Or technically, from what you were saying, it could be a family member.
Yeah.
You were saying some family members
Or it could
do
be
this too,
exactly a family
which is
member who's
insane.
exploiting. Exactly.
which is just absolutely insane. So what are we kind of, I guess, as a society, like doing to help prevent this? I know there's a lot of nonprofits, maybe there's some for-profits, and especially like the government, because I feel like out of all the issues that we're talking about right now, I feel like something like this, like sex trafficking, is so there's no controversy. Like there's nothing. There's no reason not to fight for this. I feel like, and I feel like it's not talked about nearly. If you're saying 45 million for human trafficking, like 45 million, I don't understand how this isn't kind of out there more. Do you know how many organizations, like non-governmental organizations and government departments or whatever?
Yeah. Are you looking for a number?
Or something. I don't know. Are there a lot of nonprofits like Two Wings out there?
There are a lot of organizations doing work at different levels of, I guess, from rescue to recovery to prevention and intervention. So there are organizations that are focusing on different areas to get exposure of the issue out there and more awareness and education. And then there are those that are providing hands-on direct services for those that are being rescued. And then there are others that have more of like a national campaign or something that really educates the community on what does it look like in your own neighborhood and how can your choices on a daily basis, especially when it comes to human trafficking, how can your daily choices make an impact? And that could be from shopping fair trade and making sure that the food that you eat or the coffee that you drink is not made by someone who's forced to work that field or to harvest certain grains. And so there really are a lot of choices we can make as individuals, but then also opportunities to get involved on a more local level, depending on what that interest looks like. There are companies that are also making, those decisions that they're going to be an ethical company in how they produce their products. So making that transparent supply chain visible so that people can see that they really are making that decision to be an ethical company.
Now, is it really? I know the answer is yes, because otherwise it would be done. But is it really that difficult to find these pimps and these buyers and to get them? It's obviously such a widespread thing, but I feel like how is it so difficult to end this?
I know. It seems like, such a easy and obvious thing. Like you see them, let's arrest them. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen that easily because a lot of these girls are being brainwashed when they are being brought into the life that they often won't give up their pimp. And so if they could be arrested, and which typically happens is that the girls will get arrested
for prostitution.
Exactly. And so they get brought in for questioning and they have an opportunity to say, I'm here against my will. So-and-so is my trafficker. But oftentimes they've been brainwashed to think that law enforcement is not there for you. They're there to trick you. They're not there for your best interest. And so these girls then are afraid to be honest and to share, or they could be threatened again with, reaching out to their family or whatever that looks like. And so there's all this fear that if I give that person up, there are all of these consequences. And a lot of times these girls believe that this guy is their boyfriend or someone who really cares for them. And in this sick and twisted way, like they convince themselves of that regardless of how many times they've been brutalized by this man. But they're, after 30 times of being beaten, maybe on the 31st time he said, I love you, and I think I still care a lot about you, that's enough. That's enough sometimes for them to think, well, he really does care about me. And so they don't want to give up someone that they love and they care about and get that person in trouble. And so it makes it really difficult to then go out and just, catch all of these traffickers.
And it sounds so silly. Like, how could you fall for that? How could someone beat you and sell you to people and then tell you they love you, and then you melt for them? But I mean, you see it on like, very, very small level. I think on just like on an everyday basis. I don't know if you have, girlfriends or even, your past or dating or whatever, but like, you'll see it in yourself sometimes. Like, oh, I let so-and-so, not abuse, but like I let them treat me a certain way that they shouldn't have for long enough because I thought there was something there or whatnot. And that's like on like the healthiest normal level. So if you're saying a lot of these girls are unfortunately coming from, really bad upbringings or childhoods, that's why they're more vulnerable to falling into this, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, the research that we've been doing now on trafficking survivors and just as humans, how our brains develop and work, what they're finding is that the part of your brain that makes rational decisions doesn't really fully form until you're 25 years old, which is why teenagers and young people make such emotional decisions, because their brain just hasn't developed in that way. And so if we're expecting these young girls to make rational decisions in those situations, it's not going to happen. They just aren't physically ready to make those decisions.
Yeah. What do you think some parents could do? Because if a lot of these, if they're young, you're saying like 10, 12, 13, whatever. I mean, they're still in the household, whatever that household might be. I mean, how are they even falling into these traps in the first place? Like, what can parents be doing?
Parents really play a huge role, anywhere from just developing that self-worth. Fathers have such a huge impact on young girls without realizing it, and just being present and really building up that self-worth and value in their young girls is huge. But also, watching what your kids do on social media. There are so many more social media outlets out there that, as people our age, we don't really think about or even use, that young people are using and are vulnerable because these traffickers and exploiters are creating social media handles that say that they're a lot younger than they are, and create these relationships and build trust in that way too. And they think, I'm interacting with someone that's also my age. And reality is it's, someone much older who is just waiting to exploit.
Yeah.
And so, being conscious of that, like, who are your children interacting with, and, having those conversations that not everyone online is safe.
Yeah.
Making sure they have private social media handles, that they really are not, out there unassumingly exposing themselves to these people who might not have their best interest in mind.
It's just so crazy to think that kids can have access to this whole other world, anonymous people, complete strangers. I mean, for me growing up, the worst we had online was like AIM. I can't even remember what it was, instant chat or something. But even then it was pretty much only your friends. I mean, I guess if you really want, if you knew how to work the system, you could find people, but it took effort, and you had to have, the connection was slow.
I feel like we're living in a much different world because of just the accessibility to the internet, and just so much more out there than there was back then. I think currently what they're saying is there are approximately 70,000 men daily that are scouring the internet looking for girls underage. And so that's images or opportunities to connect via chat. And so to think that that amount of men who are sick and twisted that are looking for these little girls, and to think that your child is just spending the time like, oh, it's, mindless, they're just playing a game, or they're not realizing, oh, there's a chat component to that, and you don't know who they're chatting with while they're playing that game. You don't know who's on the other end. And not to I don't want to put that fear into parents as well of let's shut ourselves out from the outside world. But really just being conscious of what is the media you're consuming as a family. And from a whole, as I mentioned earlier, is this media that is building up your young people and giving them the confidence and self-worth to who are they talking to, just being aware. I think that's the first step, is just making sure that you're active in your young person's life.
Yeah. A part of me feels like I'm never going to let my kids on social media until they're older, and I'm not giving them a cell phone. Yeah. But it's just if and when that ever happens, at that point, it's just not going to be a possibility, really.
Yeah. Oh, my husband and I joke about that all the time. I have a 14-month-old now, and I think when she's a teenager, we are moving to Montana. We are disconnecting from the internet. People. We are really disconnecting from that world, because, you just, once you know and are aware, it's hard to then close your eyes to that and to think that doesn't happen. And so once you know, it's, oh my God.
Well, that's one of my theories of maybe why people aren't talking about this more, because it's such an uncomfortable, inconvenient, horrific truth that's so apparently prominent. Mm-hmm. And it's once you know that, you kind of have a responsibility to not know that. Exactly. And so I think people are kind of maybe subconsciously putting up little blinders.
Yeah. It's easier to be ostriches, right, with our heads in the sand, and to not really think about what's going on. There's so many more, different atrocities that are happening across the globe, and, human trafficking is just one of them. But becoming more aware and just educating yourself, I feel like, is so much better than just to have the assumption that, this isn't a topic that's going to affect me or my family or my community or my friends. And in reality, it does. In some way, it affects everyone. Mm-hmm.
And I know you said it happens a lot in the United States, unfortunately. What are some other areas in the world that, are there specific areas in the world that are particularly bad with this?
Yes, so Southeast Asia, we're seeing a lot of young girls that are being sold there. And there you'll find girls even younger than our average age here in the U.S. And there's a huge industry of sex tourism there. And so... What
is sex tourism? I saw that, but I didn't...
Mm-hmm. So that's...
Is it as bad as it sounds?
It's as disgusting as it sounds, yes. It's someone who is traveling to a destination to find... to buy sex usually from a minor. Mm. And so, there are all these little girls who are being sold in it. And sometimes what we're seeing in other countries is that, families just don't have the means to support all of their kids. And so, it might be the solution for one child, for them to live if there isn't enough food for everyone. And, how do you choose one over another child? And so, it's always, whether it's here or there, it's circumstance that is dictating, why someone is being sold.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into Two Wings, because you're the founder of an organization that obviously works really heavily in this industry, and you work with survivors. So tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, so we focus on the kind of the third stage of recovery. There are those that do the rescuing, like I mentioned. There's those that are providing residential services and services that allow survivors to become stable and ready to start thinking about a future. And then we come alongside after that second stage, once they've been identified as someone who wants to think about, what does independent living look like? What does it look like for me to get a job again or get my first job? Mm-hmm. And so they are referred to us by our partner agencies, and we start working on that process of dreaming. And so we offer two different programs. We have a youth mentoring program that is kind of like a big sister program for young girls. And then we also offer a career development academy. And it's a 12-week academy where survivors come 3 nights a week to learn over 30 different topics.
Oh, wow.
And so we're really helping them prepare, not just their resume and become proficient in interviewing, but also helping them identify how to budget, how to have good communication with your employees or employers, your coworkers, and then how to have healthy boundaries. Obviously, these girls have not been taught how to have boundaries, and so really reteaching some of the skills and tools that we maybe have learned as individuals when we were younger, but now they're learning at a much later stage in life. And so we also have in that process, that 12-week process, they learn how to write effectively, whether that's technical writing or creative writing. And then we talk about what is PTSD, how does that affect your brain, how does that affect how you view your future and your success, and then how to overcome those barriers so that you can become successful. So our goal, once they come to us, the very first week we identify what are your skills, what are your passions. We utilize occupational therapists through a partner organization that they're able to then really unlock those dreams for these young women. So then the remaining 11 weeks, they get to focus on how do I reach that dream? What do I need to learn? What areas do I need to grow in as an individual so that I can be successful?
Wow. And how have you found the girls to be like when you I guess get them, when you start with them, because you bring up the PTSD, I imagine there's so much trauma. Do you find that that's a big hurdle, or that they're open, excited?
It varies.
Range,
so some have been out a lot longer. Some have just recently been rescued, and so it really just ranges on the stage that they're in healing. And so those that are a little bit further along can openly talk about it. Some just don't talk about it at all. And we keep our cohorts small and closed, so they know this is a safe space. All of the women in my class have experienced a similar situation, might not be the same, but they understand. And so there is that mutual understanding of past and experience, so that going forward in the classes, they know that if something comes up, or if we mention something, I'm not going to be judged for my past. I'm not going to be judged for my opinion on something, because they understand as well. And so because of that, what we're seeing is each cohort then forms a sisterhood. And so there are these girls who root for one another, cheer each other on when it comes to different assignments and tasks, and are there on graduation day, cheering each other on as they have to deliver speeches on graduation day. And so it's great to see them encouraging one another in that as well, especially because most people are afraid of public speaking.
Yeah.
And to help them overcome that hurdle, and to say, this is a very valuable tool that you can take with you in the workplace or even in your own life as you become an advocate. Because what we're seeing is that these survivors are becoming overcomers, and they want to be advocates in the community and really raise that awareness on what the issue really looks like.
Are these girls, now that I know that a lot of these, victims kind of fall into this because they didn't have maybe the strongest upbringings at the graduation or their life outside of the school, do they generally have a lot of family involvement or a strong community like outside?
It depends. So some have a strong, family community or friend community, and then some often come to us with no, support, emotional support at all. And so we kind of come alongside and help create that for them through the volunteers that teach our programs and those that want to be that support for them. And so we help kind of recreate that positive community, because what we're saying is, take, this life that you have known for a big chunk of your life, And all of these people who are negative and who really don't want you to succeed, we're going to take you from that community, and then we have nowhere to put you. We just want you to not be around those people. And so if you take them out of the situation, you have to replace that community. And so we're trying to recreate that through the volunteers that we have at our organization and through other partner organizations that want to come alongside and kind of create that safe, healthy environment for them.
Is that a trend in this area at all of girls falling back into that life?
So I think the current statistic is similar to domestic violence, where they go back 6 to 7 times until they are ready to really make that choice. And that's obviously, again, an average.
Of course, yeah.
So that could be less than more for some. But they really do. Yeah, some it takes a few tries to go back and, then realize, oh my gosh, this is not the life that I want. And for some, it means having children and realizing this is not the future I want for my children. And so I will do whatever it takes to, change that for them.
I saw this one documentary, and they were following a girl who had come out of it, and she was doing really well. And she took the film crew to one of the corners that she would have to work. And she saw another girl that she knew that they would work together, and and unfortunately the other girl was still in it, but they were I guess they had both gone to prison at the same time, and then they got out of prison, and the other girl went back to it, and it was so hard for her to see. I mean,
it's especially when you've already made that decision and that choice to leave. It's hard to see others still making those same choices and still, not ready to leave. And I don't want to say making those choices again as if they are choosing to be on the street, but just still having that inability to seek help and to really move forward.
And drugs probably have a good amount to do with it.
A lot of survivors are, under some kind of substance by the trafficker to either keep them compliant, to either numb them so that they don't, have the experience of seeing so many Johns every day that they just become machines in a sense. And so, there are different forms of that substance control over the survivors. And again, not all of them, but a large percentage do.
Talking about how a lot of these victims don't have families once they come out of their situation. That reminds me that I was watching this thing of saying that apparently there's guys, like you were saying, there's 70,000 guys out there online preying on girls, but I guess there was a specific group of men specifically targeting women in prison, knowing whatever their research was, however they knew this information, knowing they weren't going to have anywhere to go after.
Yes, that is huge. That's actually what is currently driving us to start working with women in jails and in prisons, because we are seeing an increase of women being trafficked outside of jail once either they're released or even starting that process while they're in jail.
That's what they were saying too, writing them letters, which I didn't even know. I didn't know you could. Apparently, anyone can send money to any prisoner. You don't have to know them. If you send them money, and they'll send money to these girls. They'll send them letters and to start establishing that relationship while they're still there. So when they get out.
Exactly, and for some of the girls, if they really have no one else waiting for them, again, it's someone who is offering them a place to stay. And, it might just be, I gave you some money in jail, so you owe me a small favor. But that small favor quickly turns into, a lot of favors and a situation where they can't escape. And so, that is something that we're seeing increasing in the trafficking community. And so we, as an organization, are moving upstream and starting to get those young women ahead of time and start talking to them about what does it look like to be trafficked, because a lot of them don't even know what trafficking is until they're in the situation.
Yeah, there was actually, I think the same girl who had gotten out of it, I think she was actually working, she had her own organization to try and help victims, and she would speak at prisons, and they, you know, filmed one of the classes, and one of the girls actually had to get up and leave because I think she like realized she was in the situation, she couldn't handle it. And so she left, and then there was another girl that was like, I've done these things, and I didn't know that this was a thing, a problem, like an issue. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what we're seeing is as education is more prevalent in the prison system and in jails, and these girls are starting to learn about what is trafficking, they don't realize, you know, that their boyfriend or, you know, an exploiter that is taking advantage of them is indeed an exploiter. For, you know, they only see them as that individual that provides that shelter and that, you know, support, you know, twisted support. And so for them to actually get to that point of, wait a minute, this hasn't been a healthy relationship. This is actually a situation where he is benefiting from me and, you know, my exploitation. And so once you see that aha moment, that is when you're able to actually have more conversations of, okay, well, now you know when you get out, you know that person is not a safe person to go back to. And so what does it look like for you to change that?
Can you tell me about any particular success stories from your organization that you like?
Yeah, so one of my favorites is this young mom who was 30 years old when she left the life, and she had twins that were 6 months old.
Wow.
And she was introduced into the life when she was 12 years old. And so she spent a huge chunk of her
18 years.
Exactly. And, you know, sold from one pimp to another. You know, when she turned 18, her first pimp sold her to another pimp because he
they do that?
Yeah. So her first pimp only worked with minors. So he only exploited minors. And so when she turned 18, he had no use for her. And so he sold her to another pimp who was much more brutal and had stabbed her multiple times in the back, broke her wrist, broke her jaw, and who also then impregnated her. And so she knew that day that, you know, they turned six months, and it was time, according to him, for her to go back to work. That she was not planning to go back. That was it. Like she knew that was not a life she wanted for her children. And, you know, in that situation, he was trying to use force to get her to get on the streets, and, you know, started to beat her. And she realized, as she was holding one of her children, she realized, I have to leave. And so she devised a plan. She left, and we met her shortly after.
Wow.
And this young woman is now in school to become a psychologist, and is working and lives on her own in an apartment with her children. And so, you know, her life has changed so much just because, you know, there was a group of individuals that said, we believe in you, and we believe you have more worth and value than what you've been told your entire life. And so, you know, we're here to give you the tools and the resources to make that happen. And, you know, we're still working with her. She graduated from our program over a year ago, and we still, whatever resources, you know, that she needs along the way, she still can come back to us and we can help her in those areas. But, you know, we know that we're in it for the long run, and we know it's going to be a journey.
So you'll help girls even after they graduate?
Yes. So typically we say we will provide the employment support for up to 2 years. There is no like firm 2 years, I'm sorry. And so they could still come back to us beyond that. We still have clients from, you know, years back that are still coming back to us in need of resources. And so we're there at that point as a connector. You know, we introduce them to other organizations that might provide the resources that they need in that stage of life, or whether that's employment support or housing support, therapy. You know, there's only so much we can do in-house. We are very niche in our approach. And so everything else, we leverage our community partners that do that area really well and whatever they focus in. And we make sure that our clients get those services
Oh,
from
that's
them.
good. So you partner up with other organizations that are a little more niche-y in that way, so you guys can
exactly
do better at what it is that you do and they do. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So is there anything about this issue that you wish more people knew, something that you've always wanted to kind of get out there that you don't think is out there enough?
I would say, I think, kind of touching more on what we talked about earlier, is the idea that, there are no girls that are out there that are waking up every morning and saying, I love my life in what, in the circumstance that I'm in. These girls are, victims of circumstance and victims of just situations that are causing them to either be forced on the streets by traffickers or by those that, we assume are prostitutes on their own. All of these young girls are hurting in some way, and whether they know it or not, can identify it or not. But for us to see young girls on the street, if you're driving down Sepulveda and you see a girl, don't be so quick to make that judgment that girl is out there on her own and is empowered. Have more of a sympathetic, I think, eye when you do see that.
In that situation, would you say, like, call a hotline if you can, or something?
Yes, if you believe that is, a situation that they need help from, yes.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this issue. Like I say, I personally feel like it's not out there enough. But, I'm just happy that you were able to come on, give us a little bit more awareness about it. You're obviously neck deep in it. So, and telling us about your organization too. Two Wings.
Yes.
Yeah. LA based.
Exactly. Yes, we're LA based and currently working on other locations. But so far we are in central Los Angeles, and we're always looking for volunteers. So whether that's someone who is a professional in various industries that wants to come and donate their time to teach a class. So all of those 30 different topics, those that are being taught, they're all taught by volunteer professionals. And so we want to create a community of young women who are successful in their fields to come in and teach our young women and to show them that it is possible, that that career is attainable, and just be that role model for our individuals, and as well as our youth mentoring program. We're always looking for volunteers that are interested in coming alongside a young girl for a year and just really being that support and opening her eyes to the possibilities that are out there.
Sure. And just women, right? Just women volunteers, which would make sense.
We do take male volunteers, some facilitator positions for our classes, and then also security. So one of the things that we provide for each class is security. And it's something that our women actually look forward to, because now they get to see men in a positive way. Men that are not exploiters, but men who are protectors, and men who treat them with dignity and with respect.
Like that.
And so our security is the first thing they see and before they come to class. And then they are also there to walk them to the bus stop or to their cars to make sure they are there safe, since our classes are in the evening. And so they get to see firsthand that there are good men out there. And so we're always looking for men who want to volunteer and to really show their support in the issue in that way.
Oh, I really like that. Good. I'm glad we got that out there, because I've known a couple guys that actually have wanted to be involved in a sex trafficking organization, but they were turned away, which is understandable depending on what the organization does. But they did want to be involved in some way, so that's great to know.
Yeah, we're always looking for good guys.
Yeah. Great. I know a lot of good ones.
Good. And for those that are like, I don't have the time to actually come and teach or become a mentor, we're always open to donors who are passionate about the issue too. We're 80% funded by private donors, and the rest is 20% private foundation. So we count on community members that believe in our mission and our work and are willing to come alongside and support that financially.
Great. Do you guys have any kind of like fundraisers or campaigns throughout the year?
We do. So we have a campaign coming up at the end of the year. that really, again, tells a story of all of the survivors that we've been working with throughout the year and gives donors an opportunity to see firsthand what they can invest in when they donate to the organization. And then in January, we do a mass graduation. So after each cohort graduates, after those 12 weeks, we do a small little graduation, a celebration of 30 people that says, great, you accomplished something, well done. But then we take all of our cohorts and we do a big graduation. So they get to walk the stage, get a certificate, and they get to see, over 200 people cheering them on as they get celebrated, and really see that, it pays off to actually, pursue something and, complete something. And so those events are usually, I think, the highlight of the year, because you get to see just the excitement and the pride in the women in accomplishing that. And we highlight one participant in that through that year that has made significant improvements or had significant hurdles that they overcame in order to accomplish success. And so we get to hear from that person, and they share their story on stage. And so
great.
it's a great opportunity to come get to know what we do and kind of meet some of our women and see just the impact that you're able to have as a community and individual in an organization like ours.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm
Thanks
so
for
glad we were able
having
to get more
me.
information out there on that. Yes, well, we'll definitely have to keep in touch. Keep us updated on the girls and the graduations and everything. So thank you for what you do and for coming on here and talking about it. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.